Hey guys! So I posted a video to my Instagram a couple of weeks ago with a flip through of these mini art journals that I basically repurposed. I bought this set of three Lunar Field Notes books about a year ago and I really liked them. I was using them primarily as like shopping lists and like to-do lists and stuff like that. And when I finished them, I figured it was kind of a waste because I really liked the covers. I thought they were really cute. So I just randomly started pasting in and collaging all sorts of stuff into them. And it was really fun because it was a much smaller format from what I'm used to working with. I'm used to working with like an A5 size. And I figured this was a little different. I had to think a little differently. I had to kind of get to the point a lot faster. So I also realized I hadn't posted a lot of actual pages from these to my Instagram or anything like that. So I figured I'd do a proper like flip through video, talk about some of the materials I used, some of the inspiration behind my favorite pages, and explain what was in them. And I'm only going to be doing these two. This one here was like a personal one where I like wrote about my day-to-day stuff, which is pretty boring, so I'm not going to bother with that one. These two are, which one came first? This one came first. So let's do a flip through of this one. Basically, I'll talk about some of my favorite pages and some of the materials I used. Most of them are pretty straightforward. A lot of just really like lots of quotes and stuff like that. Lots of space themes. This page makes no sense. Behold, deep down below, up from the ground, he made magic with his left hand, and you were prouder and stronger and the best beloved. Why does that not make any sense? Because I wanted to try, I don't know if any of you guys have ever tried like blackout poetry, where you basically take like a page from a book and then black out everything that you don't want seen and then create a poem from what's left over. And you can also kind of do the same thing where you can cut out certain things from a page and paste them together. And I thought it would be a fairly simple and straightforward thing to do. As it turns out, it was not. It was really hard. Maybe it was just the book that I chose, but it was really difficult to get things to work together. So, not my favorite, but it was an interesting experiment. And I've done a couple of them in this book here, so you'll see more later. This one is Conversations with Friends. People really liked this one, which I thought was a surprise because I thought it was too bright and it didn't quite make sense because this page intentionally, or originally was meant to be like depression and anxiety, but I think it's too bright and too happy looking. But I don't know if that's, in a sense, it makes sense because usually people who have those kinds of mental illnesses kind of put in a lot of effort to make things appear really normal on the outside and really bright and happy. And I find that we all sort of overcompensate when we're feeling down to make other people not to make other people basically think that we're okay. So I think that we often end up making things a little bit brighter on the outside when on the inside it's kind of a mess. You know how it is. So here's another one of those pages. As he rose up from the smoke, he tore off one of the three blue-green-black branches of the wonderful tree and said, I am not afraid, and I cannot give you back your very beginning, but if you will grow all soft, then you will be loved. And in all honesty, this makes no sense, but at the same time, the page that I got these words from was like a children's book. And I find that despite the fact that they're essentially chopped up and put into a different order, you still get this sort of sense of kind of childlike wonderment. I don't know if that's a word, but I just find it very interesting because even though you're essentially taking something, rearranging it, you still get the same feeling from it. You still get the same, like the word choices that you use carry a lot of meaning to what your final product ends up being. So just some thoughts. More frequently, I was finding myself sleepless, and he was running out of lullabies. That's by Richard Sykin, one of my favorite poets of all time. I love him. I don't really like this page, so I'll flip through it really quickly. These were really fun. I drew in the other mini notebook, you'll find the other side of these. I did two kind of styles. This was like the blue and purple, and this is Latin ad lucem is to the light, which makes sense because they're moths. Yeah, so that's book one. That's the full moon. And let's take a look at book two. I like this one because it's a visual pun. I also had like, you know when your English teacher goes way over the top in explaining something about like a book or whatever, and you think there's absolutely no way that the author actually put that much thought into what they were making? And I absolutely do that to my own artwork. Like I'll go over it later and I'll be like, oh, that makes so much sense now a year later. Like that was definitely a sign that, you know, this was going on internally and all that kind of thing. And weirdly enough, this one, which is just like a super simple drawing, for me, it's kind of feels like a lot more. Like it's just a phase. I find that for me, like why I art journal is that when I look back on certain journals, it captures like this slice of whatever time period that journal was created in, and it's like this piece of myself. And it's so interesting because when I look back at my old art journals and what I was writing about and thinking about at that time, it's so interesting now to see it and go, like, that's who I was. It was just a phase of me, and even though I've changed so much since then, there's still so many things that remain the same. And it's just so fascinating because you get this essentially like this slice of identity in a book that you can open, but then you can also close and put on a shelf and move on from. So I don't know, it's so silly because it's just a phase. But you know, I'm over here analyzing my own artwork. That's, you know, that's just me. This one was leftover metallic paint and Sharpie over top, and it looked like, you know, like a cross-section when you look through a microscope of like a plant or something like that. I don't know, just liked it. Weirdly enough, in these books, I find that one major theme is forgiveness, or the lack thereof. Listen here. When I was a kid, I wrote letters to my family and friends, saying everything I wanted to tell them, and then sealed them in a box under my bed labeled "in case of death." I actually did do that, and I found it recently, which is why I wrote about it in this mini journal. And I read through it, and it was really interesting because I mean, I was, as many people, I was an angsty child, and there was like a lot of stuff in there from friends that I haven't even spoken to in like 10 years, and it was so fascinating to read and to like remember the things, like remember just like the feelings I had back then. It was really it's really interesting, really interesting. I was a goth when I was a kid, very much so. Yeah, so the one thing I really loved about this one, it was like a collection of quotes that I was thinking about at the time, things that were important to me or on my mind while I was making these pages. And it was also a really great way to use up old, like smaller bits of magazines and stuff like that. So that was really, really useful for this little project as well. Here's the other side, or other half of that moth page. This is like the warmer tones. Lots of maps in this one. I don't know how that happened. Ooh, these two pages, this one and the one after it, are going to be my favorite from this whole thing. I'm going to read it out because I love it. Would we still fall in love if we'd never heard of love? Imagine there was no ideal, over-accentuated image of love and romance painted in postmodern mass media. How would we love? Would it be purer? Would it be more authentic? What would we do differently? Would we fall in love at all? What is the natural process of human feelings, and what is just a projection of how we want to love and want to be loved based on what we've seen on TV and read in books. This is from like a Tumblr post that I absolutely love. Like, you know, when someone manages to put into words something that you've thought about a million times but could never quite like say the right way. I just like, I feel this so strongly. I love it. Yeah, so lots of quotes, lots of things I was thinking about at the time. Also, these notebooks are super great because they have a whole section on how to kill a werewolf and how not to become a werewolf, like stay away from satanic rituals and stuff like that. So yeah, here's these guys. I hope you like this little sketchbook tour. I am planning to do this again. I've got a couple of field notes, which incidentally have a bunch of maps on the cover that I'm planning to use. It does take me a while to finish these because I just kind of use scraps and leftovers. Like, I don't really focus my time on them. So even though they're pretty small, they're really just... they're kind of like the leftovers of my art, if that makes sense. So yeah, so they're super chunky. Basically every page has been used twice. And yeah, I hope you like this. If you do feel like giving it a try, let me know. It's really interesting going from like a larger size to a smaller size. So if you're someone who's never tried a size like this before, let me know how you found it. Thanks so much for watching.